What is going on, The Last of Us fans? It's your boy Amaziah here, and I put myself through the arduous task for you guys' enjoyment to actually bring you guys pretty much all of the gameplay information from The Last of Us Part 2. So with The Last of Us Part 2, there's going to be some new dynamic fucking gameplay. Oh man, I fucking wanted to melt in my chair when I saw that shit. It looks absolutely fucking phenomenal. It seems overhauled, it seems faster. It seems like, of course, the characters are actually like humanized and stuff rather than being like kind of robotic. Although the last game was fun as hell. I mean, it still had those problems. You know, one of the main problems I voiced when it came to my video talking about Factions MP was that it felt a little tight. The first game felt so tight. It felt like everything was just so but like, you know, you kind of had to fight with it, but even though you had to fight with it, it was still fun as hell. I still play Factions MP to this fucking day. This game came out in 2013. It has so much longevity, and this game is trying to go for the same thing, but even more, as we got some gameplay stuff here, some combat stuff, and we also got some story stuff. So Neil Druckman actually went balls to the walls. This nigga even was in an interview and he was like, fuck it. But I'm gonna stop wasting you guys' time. It's already been a minute. Motherfuckers usually only stay on the video for like 2 minutes, so let me get into this. So there's a new dodging mechanic for fighting multiple enemies in the game. Creative play is the goal for combat situations like hiding under cars and tall grass. You know, there's a lot of many different elements now that you can use, such as squeezing through tight spaces to actually get the drop on your enemies. And of course, there's going to be a lot of times when that is going to be the kind of hint to that gameplay option for you, to where, like, you know, you have the situation to where you're hiding, and then of course there's like this little there's these two vendors and stuff that Ellie can squeeze through, and of course as you're trapped between like these two characters, you can go through those little vendors, come around and stuff, and actually kill one of them. Now we also heard that details such as thickness and height of grass and these things are determined by the type, like they determine the type of cover you can get from them. So if you're thinking that you're just going to, like, you know, run into the bushes and just like hide by crouching, that's not going to be the case. The reason why we saw Ellie really get down on her belly and of course crawl is because that's one of the hiding types that we have in this game. So hiding actually does take some level of thought. You don't just get a free pass by just running into some tall grass and actually getting low. You actually do have to make sure that your character is pretty much covered up by the grass. So that is pretty cool to hear about. You can now jump, add in more verticality, which is something that they wanted to focus on for this game because they knew that The Last of Us 1 was tight. Apparently they knew. And of course, maybe this was one of the main complaints that they heard through reviews. So they actually are adding a jump button and of course worried about the verticality of the gameplay. New crafting types like the explosive arrows, you can now craft like ammunition, which is kind of weird because, you know, I could see this in a game that has like, you know, a lot of army-based stuff within it, but with The Last of Us, it's pretty much like these survivors trying to build all of these things. So it is still kind of weird that there's like explosive arrows, but there's something in out of these reveals and stuff that I think will kind of make it a little bit more clear that, you know, things have kind of changed, that combat has kind of evolved like this because of what we know Joel learned within the first game. He could have potentially brought that to Jackson. So let's go ahead and just keep on going here. There's a new creative level to the, you know, combat and stuff when it comes to crafting, so I'm definitely liking that. Due to Ellie's size, they added tight spots for Ellie to squeeze through and flank enemies. So I pretty much already talked about that with the other one with the grass. So there's going to be these tight spots you can squeeze through and flank enemies, and like, you know, the prime example is when Ellie was under the car. There's also now like the AI, they're smart enough to know that if you're hiding, they potentially have to look into these hiding spots that Ellie can squeeze into that they cannot. So pretty much that's another thing there. Another thing too is that enemies will utilize the same engine as Ellie, so we won't be this badass motherfucking girl kicking the asses of these grown ass men. These characters will pretty much have like the same kind of systems, and there's these new systems as well to where the AI keep each other aware. If you remember in The Last of Us Part 1, the way everybody was made aware of your position is that if one character saw you, and this is exactly what they said, if one character saw you, they pretty much got this telepathic connection to where pretty much every fucking enemy in a in an immediate vicinity knew exactly where the fuck you were, and they wanted to do away with that entirely. They wanted to give the characters or the villains or of course the enemies this more realistic, this more human-like approach to, like, you know, how they will be able to find out about you and engage with you. And the way they're going to do this is through audio cues. So one of the things you may realize in the trailer if you play it back is that we hear these very distinct whistles and stuff, and these very distinct whistles actually do tell you, the player, and of course at the same time tell the AI that of course one of the enemies have been killed, that one of them have spotted you, or one of them potentially knows your position or your location or where you potentially could be. And this also goes into of course the characters knowing to look into those little tight spots that Ellie can squeeze through, or of course that she can squeeze under that they can't, and pull you from out of there. So i.e., one of the things that we know about now, because Neil Druckman, I think, revealed it to us, or one of the other directors revealed it to us, is that if one group of enemies know your location, and let's say there's another group of enemies on patrol that seems to come by, they won't know that you're there. They won't know that they won't know of your presence in general. So even if, of course, one group knew that you killed somebody and they alert each other, the other group will not know. They will have to legitimately be, of course, in contact with the other group. So they will have to pretty much come into a circle, regroup, and then of course actually start over again with their search for you with a new group added to that. However, if a new group just comes through and you already get the drop on them and kill them, they won't come through and automatically know, oh my god, we need to be on high alert status because she killed somebody, unless they find the exact same body that the original group found. And then of course they go on alert status as well in the immediate area. So that's pretty cool. It says this game may be Naughty Dog's biggest title. So Neil Druckman revealed that this game potentially will be the biggest title that Naughty Dog has potentially ever worked on. Now I don't know if he means by just what he's ever worked on or in general, but of course we know that this game will be using a upgraded, more highly fucking upgraded and evolved engine from, I think, Uncharted 4. So it's going to be taking that engine, of course, pretty much using, like, you know, the same basis as what they had in The Last of Us Part 1, but it's going to be heavily overhauled through the new engine. And this game, like, they've been creating a lot of new engines for many different things, of course, for like the whistling, of course, the new combat and stuff like that. They've been developing a lot of different engines, and this game is going to be the biggest game that they've ever had. And we saw that with, like, you know, the gameplay. I think what we saw from the gameplay potentially is the biggest area we've ever seen in The Last of Us history. So there hasn't been an area yet in The Last of Us to where, you know, you can be in one area and then, you know, you can run down the fucking road and then hide in another area. Like, you saw that, right? She actually was like on a highway. She was in a parking garage. Well, she was in a forest. Then she was in a parking garage. Then she was on a highway. Then she went from the highway into a fucking store. So you see what I'm saying here? It's a little bit more expensive. Well, it's a hell of a lot more expensive compared to what we had in the original game. So god damn, this game is said to be the biggest game that they're working on. So potentially that means the biggest game Neil himself has been working on, or Naughty Dog in general. So then we have the final piece of gameplay information, and that's that there will be new infected classes. So apparently we saw a little leak. I don't know if this was real or not, but there was an animal, which was a bear, that actually was being affected by the fungus. I forgot what it's called. I always forget what this thing is called when I do videos. Like, I remember all the time and shit when the cordyceps. The cordyceps is a bear that's being infected by the cordyceps, and apparently this was an actual official image that apparently I think leaked on, of course, the internet, and it's a bear. So who knows if that's what they mean, that there will now be animals involved in it too. Because I mean, how much can you really do with a human? I mean, we saw the little big niggas, we saw the thick boys, we saw the clickers, we saw the runners, and then of course, what more can you really do? Like, are there going to be motherfuckers that can pretty much, well, I don't know. I don't feel like they would add things like a motherfucker that can add stat buffs and stuff to the characters, because it's a grounded series. It's a grounded game. And Neil Druckman even said himself, the thing about The Last of Us Part 2, even though they're evolving things, they want it to stay realistic. They want it to make sense within the world. So having an enemy that can, like, give, you know, the other cordyceps infected people, like, you know, stat buffs and shit like that, that's not that realistic. realistic. I mean, no. The thing with the bombs and stuff, that was a little bit realistic because, of course, that was like the spores. They were like spore pods, and he was pretty much throwing them at you. So that kind of made sense. But when it comes to like an enemy being able to boost another enemy's speed, like kind of like a witch and stuff from other games and stuff, in which witches can pretty much give enemies better abilities and stuff like that. So I feel like they definitely are going to move into the territory of animals that potentially could be infected by the cordyceps, meaning that potentially it may be animals that have some kind of level of intelligence. If I'm not mistaken, the cordyceps, didn't it actually start through like did it start through the monkeys, or if I'm not mistaken, they were trying to like test the monkeys to create a cure for the I mean, they were using monkeys research as like research material for like they were like research materials for the cordyceps. But I remember, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the audio logs in the original game, there was a monkey that was being operated on, and then of course it wound up biting this guy, and of course that guy actually did wind up getting infected, and of course I think that was what led to pretty much the area that they went to on the campus. I'm pretty sure that's what it was that led to pretty much all of the bullshit and fuckery that happened there, in which of course our boy Joel and our girl Ellie kind of got ambushed because the people who were supposed to be there, which were the Fireflies, who had a group of scientists, they weren't able to, of course, hold that area due to the fact that a lot of people had wound up getting infected, and they had to abandon that project. So let's go ahead and move along here. I'm going to flip the paper. Now moving into some of the fun stuff. I feel like some of the stuff a lot of people are worried about, as The Last of Us, what truly compelled people was its story between Joel and Ellie. So let's go ahead and get right into this stuff. So Joel and Ellie are still in Jackson. This game takes place 4 years later, where they both operate within the patrols, going out to keep Jackson safe from enemies, and of course I guess to collect supplies as well. Because of course, even though they could develop some things, how are you going to create like alcohol and stuff, or medicines for people who get sick of natural diseases and stuff like that? So there's going to be all of those things. Ellie has two friends called Dina and Jesse. Dina herself, when Ellie first got to Jackson at the end of The Last of Us 1, they pretty much became friends right off the bat. So we're probably going to learn about a lot about that story in the opening of the game, although Neil Druckman did hint that the opening of the game could be different from, of course, Jackson. So maybe the opening of the game will start with the other character that we saw in the hanging trailer, which is what he called it. So the trailer with the hanging in it potentially will start as that character, which we all think is Anna right now, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be Anna, because another thing that he also wound up mentioning was that the game will have some kind of theme to it, to where if you remember the Left Behind DLC, there was the ability to jump between times. Well, it wasn't an ability that we had, but the game's story did jump between two different time periods. It jumped between Ellie's past and then Ellie's present. And with him speaking about it in that way, of course, he spoke about the past and the present, and we know that the other character was dealing with, of course, the same religious group that we know of now that is called the Seraphites. That's the name of the religious group. So they're the Seraphites, and of course they sound like a group of the Fireflies. Like Seraphites sounds like it could be close to Fireflies, but of course we know that this religious group, of course, was in the trailer with the hanging, which is what he called it, the hanging trailer. So we know the Seraphites was in that trailer, and they were facing off against the other woman. We think this woman is connected to Anna. Of course, her name has 4 letters in it, and he also mentioned as a detail for the story that potentially Left Behind, a jump between, of course, the two timelines or the two time periods is something that will happen within The Last of Us Part 2. So definitely I think that woman is Anna at this point. Joel is alive, and Joel is in Jackson. So what we saw in the original trailer, in which Joel meets with Ellie in this house, I'm guessing that what that is apparently is that potentially this is a house that they agreed to meet at if Jackson ever fell, because he does also say that bad shit will happen to Jackson within the story of this game. So if Jackson ever fell, I'm pretty sure Joel and Ellie had a safe plan to come to this home. Now, the reason why we may potentially see some dead people here is because potentially either they chased Ellie into this home, or of course they were, hunkered down in this home. And then of course Ellie came there and she killed him So potentially that's why Joel comes in from the light and stuff, and why it didn't seem like he was with Ellie from the get-go in that trailer. Potentially that's why, because whatever the hell happens to Jackson, they agreed to meet here, and then of course she says that she's going to kill all of them. So yeah, when it comes to the official information that we got, that pretty much wraps everything up. However, Neil Druckman did speak about the release date and of course the development status of the game very briefly. So when he was asked about the release date, he said that they learned their lesson from Uncharted 4 and there will not be a release date announced until they're very close to release. So we won't be getting the release date for this game potentially until E3 2019, when of course they're probably at like 80%, 90% done with the game. We won't get a release date until then, until he's completely happy with the game that he has as the director. And then of course, once we get that release date, of course, that means that the game will in fact come at the time that they state the game will come. They will not pull an Uncharted 4 to where they push the game back 2 to 3 times. And then he also mentioned that you know, the game isn't close to release yet. So potentially with, you know, we know that they've been developing it for almost 2 years now compared to the announcement, and of course how long they've actually been, you know, working on it. So they were working on it a little while before they actually announced it, and they had to actually put that scene together, but they were working on it before they announced it. Of course they were doing the writing stuff and things like that. So definitely it definitely is going through development, and he said that they aren't close to of course release, or in a state that they feel like they are getting close to release. And with that being the case, I'm going to say that the game could potentially be at like 40% complete right now, which means we may have another year or two to wait for The Last of Us Part 2, but I will be keeping you guys informed on all of the details of The Last of Us Part 2 going forward. So if you enjoyed this video, and of course the method that I actually brought all of this information to you guys, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more The Last of Us content, as I'm pretty sure we're probably going to get some official interviews with Neil Druckman through like Engadget and other websites, and we could potentially learn some new things, as these questions felt like they were a lot more set up and geared towards of course being able to reveal the best information possible. So thank you guys for tuning into the video once again. I hope you The Last of Us fans truly enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that like button if I gave you any informative value from this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace the heck out. I'm finna go play some factions in P.